My father did not raise his voice when he took my future away. That would have been easier to fight. He stood at the window of his corner office with his hands in his pockets, looking down at the parking lot like we were discussing weather, not the company I had spent 12 years building line by line, contract by contract, missed holiday by missed holiday. Then he said, calm as ever, "It's time to think about succession." I thought he meant planning, structure, a transition with guardrails, something responsible. Then he turned to me and said, "Your brother will take over. You'll help him settle in. Not support the transition, not co-lead, not review options. Help him settle in?" For a second, I honestly thought I had heard him wrong. I'm Naomi Mercer. I was 32 years old when my father decided the company I built could be handed to my younger brother, like a watch pulled from a drawer. Aether Neural had started in a cramped room with bad coffee, folding chairs, and the kind of faith that keeps you working long after your eyes burn, because stopping feels more dangerous than failing. My father raised money and opened doors. I built the core. I stayed when things broke. I stayed when payroll felt like a prayer. I stayed when clients wanted answers faster than reality could produce them. So when Grant Mercer told me Owen would take over, I waited for the correction. It never came. Then he slid a folder across his desk. On the cover was a printed title, Leadership Evolution. My name was under Owen's. "You already prepared the announcement?" I asked. His expression barely changed. "I prepared the company. That hurt more than the decision itself." "You're better where you've always been," he said. Behind the scenes, I felt the cold move through me then. Clean. Permanent. "Is this final?" He gave me that tight, practiced CEO look. "This isn't personal. It's succession." I walked out without another word, but the hallway looked different now, smaller, meaner. Like the building already knew I had been reassigned inside my own life. The next morning, Owen walked into my office with a smile that told me he already thought the room belonged to him. What was I supposed to do when my own family expected me to help erase myself? And as always, this story is a work of fiction, written by the author behind Revenge Pulse and inspired by the quiet betrayals families rarely admit out loud. By the time my father told me Owen would take over, the insult was new. The pattern was not. For years, he had kept my brother close to important work, close enough to look involved, never close enough to carry the consequences. Every time something bent, stalled, or started quietly burning behind the walls, somebody else had to catch it before our father saw how little Owen actually understood. Most of the time, that somebody was me. One night, he mishandled a client integration that should have been routine. Nothing dramatic, no explosion, just one bad decision buried inside another. The kind that ruins trust by morning if nobody catches it. I caught it. I stayed until sunrise fixing what he had broken, then cleaned the trail well enough to keep the client calm and keep my father from seeing how close we had come to embarrassment. Owen never thanked me. By lunch, he was moving through the office like the crisis had corrected itself out of respect for his last name. Later, I told my father the truth as gently as I could. Owen needed training, not a title. A real development track. Smaller decisions, time to learn. My father said that would damage confidence. Owen said starting lower would make him look small. That was the first time I understood it clearly. He did not want to grow into the role. He wanted to arrive there already crowned. My mother always had the same answer. "Family is complicated. Naomi." She said it so softly it almost sounded wise. For years, I let that softness do its work on me. A few people at the company saw the truth anyway. Miles Benton did. He never said much, but he knew who kept the floor from dropping out. By late afternoon, I found the internal folder again, Leadership Evolution. It was already written. That was the deepest cut. They had not just chosen him, they had used my loyalty to hold the company steady, while they cleared a path for him to step over me. That night, I opened an old governance file and found 6 words I had not read in years. Founder authored core protections. The next morning, Owen walked into my office without knocking. He had a coffee in one hand and the kind of smile people wear when they think somebody else has already done the hard part for them. He stopped just inside the door and looked around at the shelves, the glass wall, the framed launch photo by the cabinet, as if he were already measuring the room for himself. That look told me more than my father had. "Well," he said. Dad filled me in. I said nothing. He took another step. "He wants me overseeing full access to the core systems now. We should make this clean." Then he smiled and asked, "Ready to hand over the encryption keys, sis?" It was the sis that did it. Not because it sounded warm. Because it didn't. It sounded like something thrown over the moment to make theft sound polite. I looked at him and saw, with sudden clarity, what years of excuse-making and favoritism had built a man who thought standing near power was the same as earning it. "The company needs the right face going forward," he said. "You were never the part people were supposed to see." That landed harder than he knew. "Do you even understand what you're asking for?" I said. He shrugged. "I'll grow into it." That answer helped me more than anything else he could have said. I turned back to my desk, entered my founder credentials, and opened a control panel I had not touched in years. The screen lit up. My pulse stayed steady. Owen frowned. "What are you doing?" I clicked once. "I'm stopping a transfer that was never yours to approve." Then I activated the founder authorship lock. A red banner cut across the screen. Authored core transfer blocked. Original architect verification required. Owen went still. His smile disappeared so fast it almost made him look young again. At the same moment, the succession access chain froze across the system. Somewhere upstairs, my father's phone began to ring, and when Grant Mercer came rushing toward my office, he did not look like a man defending a plan. He looked like a man who had just remembered what, exactly, I had built. My father came into my office so fast he forgot to perform calm. "Unlock it," he snapped. "Right now." Owen was right behind him, breathing hard, still trying to pull authority back over his face. For one brief, satisfying second, neither of them looked powerful. They looked like men who had touched something they did not understand and only now realized it could bite. I stayed seated. I turned my monitor toward my father, opened the original protection clause, and slid the printed copy across the desk. Read the language under authored core protections. He didn't sit. He barely blinked. So I explained it the way I would explain a contract to someone who had spent too many years trusting his own assumptions. The company had always had the right to use the foundation I built. What it did not have was the right to transfer control of the authored core through a succession move that ignored the conditions attached to it. Owen gave a short laugh. "This is technical drama." "It isn't," my father said. That was the first honest thing he had said all morning, because he understood it now. This was no longer a family disagreement wrapped in polished language. This was governance, ownership, board exposure, risk. "I didn't damage anything," I said. "I didn't erase code. I didn't touch a single client account. I blocked an invalid transfer that changed the air in the room. For the first time, I was not the difficult daughter making things harder. I was the only person in that office protecting the company from a reckless decision dressed up as succession." My father looked at me, and his voice dropped. "Think about the family." I did, and with a clarity so cold it almost felt clean. I understood something I should have admitted years earlier every time this family needed someone to bend. It had always been me. After they left, I picked up my phone, called Tessa Vaughn, and said, I'm done asking my family to recognize what they only ever plan to use. My father moved fast. By noon, he was already telling senior leaders the situation had been misunderstood. Not forced, not prearranged, misunderstood. In his version, this was just tension inside a founder family, the kind of emotional friction that happens when business and blood sit too close together. In his version, I was not protecting anything. I was reacting. Owen took that line and made it uglier. He told people I was sabotaging his future because I couldn't handle change. That would have been laughable if it had not been so familiar. Men like him always call it sabotage when a woman stops handing them what they did not earn. Then my mother called, already crying. "Please don't turn this into a scandal," she said. "Not like this." I held the phone against my ear and asked the question I should have asked years earlier. Why is it always me? Why am I always the one who has to give something up so this family can stay comfortable? She had no answer. Only silence, breath, shame arriving too late to be useful. Inside the company, the neutral people began to shift. Not toward me exactly, just away from the old script. Late that afternoon, Miles stopped by my office and closed the door behind him. "A lot of the engineers know he can't run the platform without you," he said. That mattered not because it made me feel vindicated, but because truth was finally moving without my help. Then Tessa called. She had gone through archived drafts, board prep folders, and the older corporate layers people suddenly remember when they need protection. What she found made the whole thing uglier. My father had already prepared the succession memo. He had already built the board presentation. He had done all of it before he ever sat me down in that office. He had never planned a conversation. He had planned a ceremony. A few minutes later, Tessa called back. "There's something else in the archive," she said. "And if I'm reading it right, your father is in deeper trouble than he knows." Tessa found it where old companies hide the documents they stop wanting to remember. It was a founder appendix from the early days, back when Aether Neural was still more fear than certainty, and every signature felt like a promise made over bad coffee and worse sleep. We had written it to protect the core, before outside money grew large enough to rename what we had built and call it progress. But this appendix did more than protect the system. It said that if the original architect was stripped of technical authority to make room for a family successor without an independent review of actual competence, control of the authored core would return automatically to the original creator. Automatically. I had asked for that language years earlier because I thought the threat would come from investors, not from my own last name. My father had signed it without much debate. Now his signature had become the trap. We met in a closed conference room that afternoon. No raised voices, no audience. Just my father, Owen, Tessa, and me. I placed the appendix on the table and turned it toward him. He read the key paragraph once, then again. Owen leaned over his shoulder, saw Grant Mercer's signature at the bottom, and lost the last of his swagger. For the first time since this started, he looked less like an heir and more like a man who had walked into a room he did not understand. My father cleared his throat. That was written under very different circumstances. Tessa didn't blink. Different circumstances do not erase signed language. Nobody moved. Then my father tried one more angle. "You would really do this to your own family?" I looked at him. "No," I said. "You did this to your family. I'm just refusing to disappear inside it." That landed harder than I expected. By the end of the day, word of the blocked succession access was already moving across the technical floor, and the company could no longer pretend this was a private family misunderstanding. Once the engineers knew, the story stopped belonging to my family. It began as rumor, then hardened into fact. People on the technical floor started whispering that the system itself had rejected Owen's transfer access. Not me, not office politics. The core had refused him. In a company like ours, That meant something. Then the private messages started. One engineer admitted he had sat through meetings pretending Owen made sense while quietly correcting the damage afterward. Another said he had rewritten one of Owen's technical summaries before it went upstairs because leaving it alone would have exposed how little Owen actually understood. They had all seen pieces of the truth. They just had not spoken, while the Mercer name still felt heavier than facts. Miles was the one who finally stepped in. He came into my office, shut the door, and said, "People are done covering for him." That hit harder than comfort would have. By midday, a major client asked for clarification about leadership stability. They did not sound angry. They sounded careful. Careful is worse. It means trust has already started packing its bags. The board changed tone almost immediately. This was no longer father and daughter fighting over succession. The questions were about continuity, control, and exposure. My father kept trying to force the old narrative into the room. He said I was escalating, overreaching, turning a contained matter into a public one. But the system had already proven the one fact he could not talk his way around. He had tried to give away something he did not actually control. An hour later, the board sent notice of an emergency meeting on governance, succession misconduct, and founder control exposure. For the first time since he walked into my office smiling, Owen looked afraid. The board meeting started at 9 and felt heavy before anyone spoke. Legal counsel was there. So was Tessa. On the table sat signature records, archived appendices, the succession timeline, and a technical risk report cleaned stacks of paper trying to make an ugly truth look orderly. My father spoke first. He called it a succession misunderstanding, a timing issue, a family matter pushed too far. He kept reaching for softer language, but the board had already moved on from soft. One director called it a governance breach. Another called it concealed transfer preparation. A third used the phrase that ended the debate, competency bypass. That was the word that changed the room. Tessa walked them through the sequence piece by piece, the prepared memo. The board materials drafted before I was ever told, the attempt to hand Owen technical authority without an independent review of actual ability. Then Miles spoke. Calm. Precise. He explained the risk in plain language. If Owen took control of the core without understanding it, the company would not fail in one dramatic moment. It would fail quietly. Then, all at once. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I'm not here to damage the company. I said, I'm here because family was used as cover for taking authority that was never his to hold. No one interrupted. Then one board member looked at my father and asked, Did you expect your daughter to train the son you chose to replace her? My father said nothing. That silence did more damage than any answer could have. Owen tried once more. He said he could grow into the role. A director looked at him and said, This company is not a practice field for your confidence. After that, he stopped talking. By the end of the hour, the choice was plain return the core to the person who built it or accept a deeper collapse in trust. Right before the vote, my father leaned toward me and said, so quietly, only I could hear it, I thought I was protecting the family. I looked straight ahead. He had protected the wrong son for too long. The vote was not dramatic. That made it hit harder. No one shouted. No one slammed a hand on the table. The board simply moved, one decision after another, with the cold efficiency of people cleaning up a mess they should have stopped sooner. Technical authority returned to me. The core went back to the only hands that had ever actually known how to carry it. My father lost day-to-day control. Owen was removed from the succession track and placed under supervised development, far away from anything that could damage the heart of the company. But the real humiliation came before that, in a line entered cleanly into the record unqualified for immediate technical leadership. He heard it, so did everyone else. No speeches, no performance, just correction with witnesses. The new rules followed immediately. No family appointment could touch the core without independent review. Founder authorship rights were formally restated. A few executives kept their jobs, but not their standing. Miles, on the other hand, was given broader responsibility. When the room finally split between image and competence, he had chosen competence. After the meeting, my father stopped me in the corridor. "I thought I was protecting the family," he said again. I looked at him and realized there was nothing left to soften. "You were protecting the son you were comfortable with," I said, "not the child who built this." He flinched. That was the part I had wanted him to feel all along, not the governance loss, not the title slipping, but the truth. As I walked away, I passed the glass wall outside the boardroom and saw Owen still standing there alone, staring at his own reflection like he no longer recognized the name that had always opened doors for him. That night, I walked back into my office alone. Winning did not feel clean. It felt late. A few weeks later, the company had stopped shaking. Not because everything was healed, because the weight was finally resting where it belonged. I did not celebrate. I went back to work. I repaired the parts that had bent under a succession plan built on ego instead of truth. I rebuilt trust with the engineers, with clients, with the people who had spent too long watching the wrong name outrank the right one. That mattered more than applause. My mother tried, in her careful way, to close the distance. I let her speak. I answered kindly. But kindness is not the same thing as return. Some cracks do not close just because someone finally admits they were there. Owen drifted out of the center of everything. For the first time in his life, no chair was waiting for him just because he shared the family name. My father lost the language he had used for years to shape my life without asking my permission. He could no longer call control love and expect me to nod. That was the real victory. I had taken back more than the company. I had taken back the right to be named correctly inside my own life. People talk about strength as if it is a gift. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just the thing your family gets used to spending. But even a bridge has a limit. So if this story stayed with you, remember this: being needed is not the same as being valued. I love them. I just finally loved myself enough to stop disappearing for them.